True stories told by real people.
I've written this one out before on another thread. It was probably about 9 or 10 years ago. I was back in my hometown visiting family on a random weekend, and an old friend and I had run into each other and made plans to meet up later that night. There was a place about 5 minutes from my family's land that was a hangout spot when we were younger. It was literally just a place to park, off a dirt road, out in the sticks, that kind of place. Nobody went down there anymore, but after a night of shooting the shit, we went down to reminisce on old high school and college memories. We go to this place and it's pitch black. You're in the woods near an old schoolhouse foundation and a creek bed that is dry except for like 1 month a year when it rains real bad. So we're just on the tailgate, chatting, laughing, and clear as day, we hear what we can only describe as children giggling. So we get a little creeped, walk over towards the school foundation, and then this super loud bell ringing sound happens right on where the school would have been. We looked at each other and we're both a little freaked, but decide we're just imagining things. So we go back to the truck, and it happened again. But this time you heard what sounded like kids on a playground. It was shrieking and screaming. It was absolutely the creepiest feeling. My skin was crawling, so we left. Since then, people have reported the same thing in the area, and some have even said they can see the forms of kids playing near the schoolhouse. I'd never heard it until after I went, but I have never gone back after dark. TLDR, hung out in the woods by an old schoolhouse foundation and heard kids screaming, laughing, playing, and even the school bell.
Story 2. The Girl in the Cemetery Grave. This is the feeling I am getting right now. I haven't thought about her in a while. Anyway, I started to dream about her. In my dream, she told me she was fine. She showed me she was with her dad, and she was happy now. I knew what her dad looked like. I shook this off as this girl had taken up a couple of months of my life as I researched her. I didn't know what she looked like. Fast forward to 2012, the family biographer emails me out of the blue. He has a photo of the girl. The thing is, back in the Victorian days, you had one shot at a photo. It was too expensive otherwise. This photo was death photography. She was in the photo. She was dead. This girl was the one that appeared in my dreams. Every mark I saw on her face was in that photo. I am sure she still watches me.
Story 3. The TV stand that opened itself.
Okay, I got a little something to contribute. So I was 15 years old, and for some reason I became interested in demons. Probably an edgy teenager phase, honestly. But I would spend a lot of time on the internet looking up various facts on demons. I didn't believe any of it. I just found it interesting that people actually believed some of the stuff they posted. So one night, I'm browsing a website about summoning demons. It's worth mentioning that I'm in my bed and I'm browsing using my Nintendo Wii on my TV. It was all I had at the time. So I stumble upon this website around 3 a.m. It has an eerie vibe to it, all black background with simple black lettering. The website goes to tell the steps it takes to summon a demon and even goes into the proper etiquette to use once you make contact with a demon. According to this website, being disrespectful could lead to your death. As I start getting into it, I hear a loud bang from my TV stand as the lower door swings open and the TV shuts off simultaneously. This left me in pitch black, with the light switch being on the other side of the room. I felt my heart pound in my chest, but I was too terrified to get out of bed to turn on the light. Eventually, I mustered up the courage to flick the lights on and proceeded to inspect my TV stand. One reason I was particularly shook up was because my TV stand door was actually broken and particularly hard to open. It would get caught on a lip, and I physically would have to push it in and lift it over in order to clear it. Needless to say, I didn't understand how it opened seemingly on its own. I had also lost the remote some years back, so I didn't accidentally turn it off. Needless to say, after it was all said and done, I am still puzzled on what happened that night. TLDR, read about summoning demons, loud crack, spooks ensued.
Story 4. Angela haunted the old college house.
Angela. Disclaimer, this story makes me feel a little crazy. All of the events are true, but are obviously open to interpretation. All were witnessed and unexplained by at least 2 people. Nobody was on drugs either. I've also never been a big paranormal believer. My 2nd and 3rd year of college, I lived in a very old house in a historic, adorable neighborhood. The house had 3 bedrooms and a bathroom upstairs, and a den-turned-bedroom downstairs. My room was upstairs. We also had a detached garage that had been turned into a party room over the generations of college students. Glow-in-the-dark floor paint, couches, beer pong, and pool tables, it was pretty awesome. It was a great 2 years, but some weird shit happened too, and we blamed it all on Angela. The first party we threw in the garage, we had pulled out some colored chalk, and people had been doodling their names and pictures on the old workbench along the back wall of the garage. When we went out to clean up the next day, we found the name Angela scrawled across all the other chalk in caps and with a box around it. There were no strangers at the party, and nobody named Angela attended. Not long after, we had a Friendsgiving at our place with roughly 15 people. I got up to get some water from the tap, turned the tap off, and walked back to the table. Right as I sat down, the water turned back on, full blast. Nobody was in the kitchen when I walked back in to turn it off. Kitchen only had one way in-out and was visible from where everyone was sitting. My room was dubbed Antarctica because it was always freezing cold, even when the rest of the house was warm. Figuring it was just old house problems, I bought a space heater. My friend carried it up for me, but the second we plugged it in and powered it on, the smoke detector went off. There was never any smoke, and no heat had been produced yet. It wouldn't turn off until I took the battery out. The same thing happened when I tried to put it back up a week later and turn the heater on. It stayed on my desk without its battery until I moved out. Shortly after the heater incident, I walked into my closet and stepped in a sopping wet puddle. I had a fluffy shag rug down, and it had soaked up quite a bit of water. The ceiling of my closet was literally the roof, so I immediately assumed there was a leak. But it hadn't rained in a few days, and all the boards were bone dry, so I picked up the rug to see if maybe it had come from below. Nope, and no stray water glasses or bottles.
A few weeks later, my roommate also found an unexplained puddle in her closet as well. Just a giant puddle on the hardwood with no feasible source. In a way, this one felt the creepiest. We had a pretty good group of people hanging out in our living room, drinking and playing games. One of the guys has his dog along. This dog is super chill, goes everywhere with this guy, just mellow. He's asleep on the floor, then all of a sudden bolts upright, jumps between his owner's legs, stares straight into the far corner of the room, and just growls with the hair on his neck up. The weird part? Our cat spent hours staring at that corner and would sometimes randomly hiss and run away. We always just thought he was being a cat. At the time, I tried to do some research to see if anyone who had lived there had died in some tragic way or something, but came up empty-handed.
Story 5. The Child Ghost Who Plays Handbells.
Not my only paranormal experience, but I'm currently living with this now. My house is a rented house, although we've lived there for roughly 11 years now. I've always seen and heard things that were reminiscent of a child playing, but I was and am the only kid in the house. Things like handbells ringing, feet pattering up and down the hallways, giggles and such. I've asked my mom about it several times, but she never seems to hear them. I brushed it off as my anxiety playing games with me, up until recently. A few months ago, I was taking a shower and had my speaker sitting on the toilet, just minding my business and jamming out to some Meg Thee Stallion, until I heard something heavy fall in the bathroom with me. I peeked my head out of the curtain and my speaker was clear across the bathroom at the door. I fixed it and went back to shaving. Then, just last month, I was home alone and sitting on the couch when I felt someone small sit beside me and lean up against me. I could see the fabric buckle as if someone were sitting there. Naturally, I was confused as fuck, but I was chillin'. Same month, my door opened and someone sat down on my bed and held my hand. It's been getting incredibly more consistent and noticeable. I will still hear feet pattering up and down the halls, child's laughter and handbells, and things will fly across the room with seemingly no force that caused it. I've just recently found out that the previous owner was an old guy who died in my room, and he had a young grandson who he would always play with and hold. Turns out that the grandson also died a few years after his grandfather did, due to heart cancer, and his favorite pastime was playing handbells and running up and down the halls with a toy plane. Ever since then, I've lovingly called him Benson, as that was what was legible on the previous owner's notes he left behind when he passed, and have been playing with and talking to him. He has thrown a lot less hissy fits with throwing things and running up and down the halls, and is more social, stronger, and seemingly more real. I can feel his hand clasped in mine and his small head on my shoulder, the way he climbs on my bed and sits down, and how he just acts. I'm a spiritual person, given I read astrology and am learning more about witchcraft. However, my parents are extremely religious Christians who won't allow any kind of magic in the home, so I don't know how to reach out to him and talk to him. Is there anything I can do to contact him?
Story 6. The Cigarette Butt That Moved Twice.
My old apartment was the upstairs of a house, which was built in 1890 and used to be a church. There was a room by the front door, I'll call it the front room, which I used as a living room because the actual living room felt spooky and weird stuff happened in there. Noises, voices, bumps and creaks, knocking. That place was haunted. One example, a friend of mine is over. We're in my front room. He goes to the living room to play some guitar, which is down the hall, and goes to the bathroom and comes back to the front room. I then go to the bathroom, which is down the hall right by the living room. As I'm about to go into the bathroom, I look in the living room and see a cigarette butt sitting directly in the middle of the living room on the carpet. I'm like, why did he leave a cigarette butt in the middle of the room? So I pick it up and put it in the ashtray, then go to the bathroom and head back to the front room. I ask my friend, hey, it was so weird. There was a cigarette butt right in the middle of the living room. I put it in the ashtray. And he says, wait, what? When I went to the bathroom and came out, I saw the same exact thing. It was in the middle of the room, and I didn't know how it got there, so I put it in the ashtray. So to summarize, friend was in living room and smoked a cig, went to bathroom, came out, saw cig butt in the middle of the living room on the carpet, which makes no sense. He picked it up and put it in the ashtray. I very shortly afterward went to the bathroom, saw same cig butt in middle of room, and put it in the ashtray again. Ashtray was empty. This was the only cig butt in the room. Neither of us have any way of explaining how that happened. A cig butt jumping out of an ashtray twice, all the way to the middle of a room?